Hello everyone, I'm in Auckland today, the largest city in New Zealand with a population of approximately 1.6 million, also called the City of Sails, and you can see why. Nice waterfront, beautiful boats, yachts, happy people dining. Today we've got the opportunity to meet a special person, Kenyon Clarke. Please join me for the interview. Kenyon Clarke.
Yes.
Developer, investor, entrepreneur, and CEO of DuVal Group. Thank you for allowing me to take the interview today.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Can you please tell me the name DuVal Group? Where is that from?
So actually, that's a bit of an interesting story because it's a name on my mother's side, and she was really the inspiration for me initially in business. And so I wanted to name my company after her, just to honor her. But the ironic thing was that I failed to spell the name correctly when I registered the company. And when you have the name of your business 200 feet in the air in neon on a crane, it's a little bit too late to go back and change it. So DuVal is a family name, but I've spelled it incorrectly, but now we have it.
Excellent. Kenyon's company is one of New Zealand's largest apartment developers and highly successful throughout life. And he's the person that's some 10 years ago lost it all and has managed to reclimb the ladder, possibly even higher than at that time. Question, is New Zealand too small for Kenyon?
Oh, look, I think, I love this country and it's home. And so it's not really just about ambition. It's also about wanting to develop a society and communities in the country that I love. And so I don't think that no matter what we do overseas in terms of business, New Zealand will always be home. It will always be the place that I come back to. But having said that, Charlotte and I, we're taking the kids in the next 18 to 24 months, and we're going to be based offshore. So we're opening offices in Singapore, Hong Kong, mainland China, and in London. And so I'm definitely going to be working on our international rollout. And but I know that I'll always come back to New Zealand.
When you travel around the world and you see the infrastructure in Europe, the beaches, the Esplanades, or the ski fields in France or America, and then you come back to New Zealand and you have a look what's happening here. How do you feel? What's the feeling you get? Because in some cases we have the beautiful nature, but then some of the infrastructure we think, why can't we have the same?
Look, I definitely think that we've got problems in terms of our infrastructure. And in 2009, I had traveled to Europe and was working on Canary Wharf with some of the largest developers in the world. And then I was working in Germany with a group over there on a big retail portfolio. And I certainly felt that there were things that we could do better in New Zealand. And I suppose travel provides that opportunity for everyone to be able to come back and to implement the things that you see overseas. But I'm not somebody who spends a lot of time thinking, oh, it should be like this. I sort of think, well, you've got to, rather than just articulating the problem, you're far better off to be part of the solution.
Going back some 10 years or more, when the Bank of Scotland fell over and you had to immediately repay the loans, given the cash flow that you had, how was it not possible to refinance?
So what happens during a credit crunch is there's no credit. And I think that's back in 2008, when the GFC struck and Lehman's failed, there was just no one supplying credit anywhere. And in fact, the BNZ had huge difficulty being able to secure funding for New Zealand full stop. And when international markets are in such incredible turmoil, there's just not the flexibility to do that. So when the Bank of Scotland came to us and said they needed to be repaid $64 million within the next 24 hours, there was just no possibility because there wasn't a lender that actually even had the funds or the flexibility to provide that level of funding within New Zealand. And that's something I talk about often in terms of just how underbanked we are in New Zealand. I mean, we've only got 4 or 5 big banks here, most of them Australian owned, and New Zealand is quite unusual around the world in terms of we just don't have many options for finance. And that's certainly something I'd like to see change over the years.
from that situation, what can you suggest to others, perhaps?
Look, I think the key thing is that would be to make sure that you diversify your risk and you diversify your financing risk. And that means not aggregating all of your debt facilities working with one lender, so you've still got flexibility, and ring fencing. It's really, really important. If I look back at myself in my late 20s, and today I'm 42 years old, right? And I look back on my journey in business as a 20-year-old, I had no idea that the banking system could have such a comprehensive and wholesale collapse. I just didn't realize it would even be possible. Who would have ever thought that the Bank of Scotland International, which is actually owned by the Halifax Bank of Scotland, would go bust? Who would have thought that? Who would have thought incredible names such as Lehman's would go bust? No one. And what we've seen is, the greatest over, the last decade or so, we've seen sovereign nations through quantitative easing printing huge amounts of currency to underpin the whole of the financial system. So you don't know what you don't know. And what I would suggest for anyone who was concerned about or who wanted to build some real financial resilience into their portfolio or into their business, diversify your banking risk.
Okay. What, in that difficult situation, what important moments or things which stand out that helped you climb out? It could be things relating to business, or it could be private individuals that supported you, helped you.
Yeah, okay. So I think that during my career, I had always worked alone, or worked with family. And one of the things that I had learned is that sometimes you get a better outcome by collaborating. And it was only when I opened myself up to the idea of working with other people to build projects and getting that broad range of ideas and creativity that things really started to take off for us. And so collaboration has been a really important aspect to our business. And in fact, rather than just collaborating for a period of time until you have built an economic machine, beyond that, I still wish to collaborate, and we're doing that today. So we're doing that in terms of the joint ventures that we're forming overseas, in terms of developing offshore sales channels, in terms of our prop tech businesses, and in terms of construction and procurement. Collaboration is important.
How ready are you for a GFC now?
Look, I think that, they say there's nothing new under the sun. And yet at the same time, we know that the next economic downturn will be different from the last one. If you look back at, previous downturns, if you look at, the share market crash of the late 80s, it was quite different from the GFC of 2008. And Ray Dalio talks about this a great deal in terms of the economic cycle, in terms of the short and the long-term debt cycle, where he's saying that there are cycles within 10 years and then the longer-term debt cycle 80 years. Now, look, I can't possibly predict when there is going to be another downturn. All I can do is build actual financial resilience into my own portfolio in terms of my own business. And that's by working with a diversity of lenders on a diversity of different projects and ensuring that the things which in my view are recession proof, which is accommodation, are the absolute bedrock of our portfolio. And I just would like to draw some attention to this, because it's one of the key differences between commercial property and residential property, that in an economic downturn, there are often businesses that just disappear. In New Zealand, we've just had Dick Smith in, recent memory. And if you were a commercial property investor and you had owned Dick Smith property, well, the next day they're not paying the rent, right? Whereas for me, residential property, one, we've got the latest stats in from Colliers International, and we know that there have been greater total returns in residential property than all property in Auckland. So that's industrial, retail, office. Residentials outperform both in terms of total return and also in terms of rental growth. And that, for me, is very, very important, because I've got absolute certainty that there's always going to be somebody who's going to want to rent a home.
Maybe following on to that question, the build to rent.
Sure.
What is the return on investment if you don't incorporate the capital gains into it?
Well, I think the return on investment, I mean, are you talking about return on investment on a discounted cash flow basis?
Say for example, someone that bought one of your products,
sure,
one of your apartments,
yeah,
and went into your portfolio renting scheme, yeah? What could they be expecting to get without the capital gains?
Yeah, I think that, I think if you're looking to invest in residential property as an individual rather than as a build-to-rent investor, build-to-rent investors tend to be institutional investors, that you should be looking for between 3 to 5% per annum in terms of your straightforward yield.
Last year, we had the ban on foreign buyers able to buy residential property, of course, apart from Singapore and Australia. What do you think of it?
Okay, so that's not quite correct. So we don't have a ban on buyers purchasing foreign property. We have a ban on buyers purchasing second-hand property. And so foreign buyers are still able to buy brand new property which has overseas office consent to be able to do that. So a developer like us would be required to go and seek a dispensation to be able to sell offshore and to sell a product. Having said that, in 25 years of business, I've never once sold a property offshore. So it certainly hasn't impacted our business in any way. We're a business where our market is for New Zealanders. That may well change, right, as we deliver more and more volume, and we will look at selling to overseas purchasers. But at the moment, that doesn't touch and hasn't touched our business.
If deposits rates and mortgage rates drop, like for example in Europe, how do you think this would affect the property market in New Zealand?
Look, there is a flight to yield or a quest for yield all around the world from some of the world's largest institutions where people are looking for returns. I mean, we've seen, with international interest rates at historic lows for such a long period of time, where there is no sign that they are going to increase in any significant way, there is always going to be the search for yield. And that has meant that in New Zealand in particular has become more and more interesting to large format institutions. And interestingly, where you've got Blackstone, which manages trillions of dollars, right? It's an enormous, enormous private equity house. They are investing in New Zealand. And we have seen that change, and what we're going to see change further with the greater capital requirements for New Zealand banks to hold cash, that we're going to see more and more of these large institutions coming down here and competing in the traditional banking market.
And upsetting the Australian banks.
Well, whether they upset them or not, I mean, despite the capital controls that we've seen imposed upon, the Australian banks, in aggregate last year, they made $5 billion. So I think even with zero growth, the Australian banks are doing incredibly well. Yeah.
Most of your business is focused in South Auckland.
So most of our business is focused on the southern corridor.
Southern corridor of Auckland. Why not other areas?
So for us, I believe that the areas where there are the largest, we have the greatest population growth, where it's coming from a low base, where there's the greatest infrastructure spend, and employment hubs. For me, it's about those fundamentals of investment. And through that southern corridor, I see that as a key gateway to the rest of New Zealand.
Question about commercial or residential property for an investor. You've touched on it before in terms of residential. Maybe you could just elaborate on it a little bit further. Commercial or residential, the trend for the future.
Well, over the last 5 and the last 10 years in Auckland specifically, the research is unequivocal. Residential has outperformed in terms of both total return and in terms of rental growth, the office, the industrial, and the retail market. So I'm not somebody that is bound by ideology when it comes to investment. I'm somebody that just looks at the statistics. And from that perspective, 100% of my family's investment is within residential property.
And you can see a trend sort of disappearing. Offices are creating communities, co-working spaces.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really, really interesting. I think that is a huge opportunity for New Zealand. For us to grow is we are innovators, we are entrepreneurs, and creating those hubs around within residential communities for me is really, really interesting.
in terms of the day-to-day business, you've got a big operation.
Yeah.
You've got lots of people working in your company. What aspects of your business you don't like doing? What takes your time and you don't like doing it?
You know, I suppose I just don't have a mindset that really focuses on the things that I dislike, and I think I've trained myself over, you know, the past 20 years to do whatever's necessary. And so I think if you have a mindset where you have an avoidance behavior to a certain aspect of your role where it's required, then I think that's always going to be a problem for you. And I've just built enough muscle in that direction to do whatever I need to do.
Okay, maybe what's
What's my favorite
thing within your business?
Expansion and growth. Expansion and growth and opportunity, of course. You know, for me, that's where the excitement lies. That's where the adventure lies. And that always revolves around people. That revolves around the collaboration.
So it's a good thing you're not in France in the 17th century.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, without doubt.
Practical question. If someone has close to $100,000, what would you suggest how to get them onto the property ladder, and what steps would you recommend they first research before investing into property?
The first thing I would say is take action.
Apart from buying from DuVal Group.
Well, I mean, that's my advice. So I would say, I mean, the statistics are unequivocal. You could invest in Christchurch, Tokoroa, Palmerston North, Wellington, wherever you liked. But the fact of the matter is that Auckland's outgrown every other market here, and it's outgrown every single asset class. And DuVal is, you know, the country, and we just actually had the statistics out from CBRE for August. So across the whole of New Zealand, we are the second largest apartment developer behind Housing New Zealand. So from my perspective, you know, if you're going to buy from us, you're going to buy from someone who's got scale, who delivers quality in the locations where there's the greatest possible growth. That's my advice.
So, some other topics. Favorite place in New Zealand?
Auckland.
Auckland.
Yeah.
Not Hooker Lodge?
I love Hooker Lodge, you know, and I love the escape. You know, we, as a family, we moved to Auckland, I think 6 or 7 years ago. And my only regret is that I didn't move here 20 years ago. It's a phenomenal city. I mean, you've got all of the beaches. You have, it's a thriving metropolis. And Auckland has got more in common with Hong Kong, with Sydney, with Melbourne, and even London than it does with Christchurch or Wellington. It truly is an international city, and I love the diversity that we have here. We're multicultural. It's an exciting, thriving place to be. And if you spend any time down by the waterfront, I mean, it's just great.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
But look, I love the whole of this great country. It's a magnificent place to live.
Life-work balance. Maybe
No
what does your day look like?
Look, I think people who seek a quest for balance aren't busy enough. So you actually find balance through what it is that you do in life. So, and I think, you know, there is an expression that says, give a job to a busy person, because then you'll know it will get done. And I actually think that you find balance by doing more, by creating more. And so, I mean, my typical day looks like this. So I wake up in the morning, my personal trainer turns up to the house.
What time?
I wake up generally around about 7:30. And
is the personal trainer an incentive to get up?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the rituals and the disciplines that you create through your life that, you know, that gives your life some rhythm. And we talk about those rituals, and we talk about the fact that that our children need to have a routine. Yet often as adults, we forget that. But I certainly think routine is really, really important. And so for 4 days a week, my personal trainer's here in the morning. I will make sure I box or I do a spin class every single morning. I get up and I have breakfast, and then my day starts.
Great. Some questions more like a blitz type questions.
Sure.
You don't have to, well, you're not going to think about them too long because that's not about Kenyon anyway.
Sure.
Thinking for long, but if you want to answer in a long way, happy for you to do so. Please do. If you could meet any person that ever lived, who would it be?
Look, I'd have to say Jesus.
What would you ask him?
Are you the Son of God?
What helps you reach your set goals?
Discipline. Unrelenting focus.
Your favorite books?
Colleen McCulloch's Empire series, which starts with the first man of Rome.
What things can you not tolerate in people?
A lack of personal accountability.
In your view, most important qualities of a successful person?
Conscientiousness, intelligence, diligence.
Tell me a competency or a skill that you do not have but wish to have.
I'd like to speak French.
Because the DuVal is French.
Well, my sister lives in Paris, and I spent a lot of years at school learning French, and to my embarrassment, it's pretty poor still. And it's just one of those things. The other skill I'd like to have would be I play the guitar, but pretty poorly. And I'd love to be able to play beautiful classical guitar.
It's moments like this. I never learned a music instrument.
Yeah.
Kids are learning now, so it's
fantastic.
But it's difficult for me to learn, so kids have to do it.
Yeah, well, I learned to play guitar as an adult.
Yeah.
And so I learned to play guitar in my 20s, and it's still, for me, something I would like to progress and do better at.
If you have $1 billion, what would you do?
Give it away. And that's something for me that I'm absolutely passionate about. I know that through my life building this business, that we will build an incredible machine. Yet at the same time, the thing that I think about more today, certainly with my wife, is our foundation, the DuVal Foundation, which is our registered charity. And I know that throughout my life, we will give away the greater majority of our fortune.
Sorry, I don't remember it now, but I've seen on your last visit to Christchurch on the T-shirts there was is that
she's
part
not
of
rehab. Yeah, absolutely. So I was there talking to a group of young men, many of them who are ex-prisoners, and really talking to them about personal accountability and responsibility and what it is that they need to do to be able to make something of their lives. And it's something I feel really, really strongly about.
How long has that been going for, that particular aspect of it?
That's been going all my life on a one-on-one basis. But our charities existed for the last 3 or 4 years. And so to provide more formality to it. And She's Not Your Rehab as a project has been a collaboration or a partnership with people who we really believe in their mission and we share their same values. And we do our research before we align ourselves with any particular group. And Matt and Sarah in Christchurch are the most incredible people, and the work that Matt does in terms of talking about breaking cycles of abuse and managing trauma are really quite incredible, and things that my wife and I are passionate about.
Have you seen measured results from your work?
Look, it's really
where
interesting.
A person, say for example, person has changed or improved in what you...
I think what you have to, when it comes to the work that you do from a commitment to your fellow man, you have to be careful about judging outcomes. So this year, our charity provided Christmas for over 250 children. And that's something that's very close to our heart. Yet when we provide that Christmas, we don't tell the recipients of the gift who it was who gave it to them. We don't brand that DuVal, we don't brand that our DuVal Foundation. We make no mention of it, because when you gift, you need to be able to gift openly and freely without looking for anything in return, because otherwise your gift has no substance. And so I think I do my best to be impactful and careful and caring, and to, more importantly than anything else, to be kind in my approach, while not letting people off the hook in terms of what they should be accountable for, in my view. I don't measure the outcomes, because if I were to do that, it would potentially disincentivize me from doing anything more.
Good.
Just do what I can.
Christian, what do you live for?
The connection that I have with people, without doubt. And, that connection that you feel most strongly is obviously the one that you have with your family. And, you also have a connection to the people that you work with, the people that you support, the people that you care about. And I have a connection to all people who want to do well and to be able to see them on that journey.
Main rule in life.
Do no harm.
Now, imagine wind life back 20 or 25 years back.
Yeah.
Imagine that you're at the start of your journey. You can give one advice to yourself that you will remember. What would it be?
Give up smoking.
So after the interview?
I would still advise myself to give up smoking, but whether I do or not is an entirely different matter.
Childhood dreams that have not yet realized.
You know, I'm someone who's incredibly fortunate in my life. I think that all of the things that I had dreamt as a child of achieving, I've been fortunate enough to do that. And, you know, material things mean very little to me today, but one of the dreams that I have had as a child and haven't yet realized would be writing a book. And that's something I would still like to
take off. Maybe it's not too far away.
Oh, look, I think so. But also too, you know, the topic of it, I mean, you have enough of life, you know, in the business arena, but I'm not sure if I want to write a business book. Yeah. I think for me, it's almost on a completely separate topic.
Imagine that you're born again. What would you choose, wealthy or poor family?
Wealthy, without doubt. It's a mad question. And the reason being is that there is genuine and grinding poverty in the world. And I'm not talking about, you know, I'm not talking about just struggling. I'm talking about parts of the world where there is no sanitation, there's no fresh water, where there is no electricity. And if you don't believe that there is privilege in the world just through the lottery of birth, then you don't really understand poverty in the true sense of the word. So from that perspective, I would always rather be born in a country and to a family that, you know, that had opportunity.
The reason I asked that question is I read an article about this person was saying, the saying was, you know, children in wealthy families are poor kids.
Sure.
And children in poor families are wealthy kids, just because, say, in a poor family, the motivation, the hunger you have to do well. And you see in a lot of wealthy families, children, you know, either wasting their life, wasting their parents' money, and not having an ambition to go and succeed.
I don't believe that's arbitrary. How you raise your children is a choice. You know, and so if you choose, you know, to allow your wealth to insulate you to the extent that you neglect your duty as a father or as a mother, then you're going to have a poor set of outcomes. But if you engage with your children and you love your children and you work with them to build real resilience and discipline through, whether that be through sport, whether that be through work, or whatever it might be, that's your duty. You can't abdicate your responsibility to be a good parent.
Be good parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question.
Sure.
If you were the Prime Minister of New Zealand with unlimited power, 3 things that you would do.
Resign. Not interested, don't want the job. I honestly think that it's an ineffective position to make real and meaningful change.
With unlimited power.
Oh.
You're almost Kenyon Clarke, could be Prime Minister dictator with unlimited power,
you know,
not getting bogged down.
The problem with unlimited power is that it can become tyrannical and that the checks and balances that we need in life are really, really important. And tyrannical control is something that I would never want to exert and never want to be tempted with. And so as the Prime Minister with unlimited power, I'd resign.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kenyon.
Thank you. Good to chat, man.